This is Nobody Cares. There's an addendum to this story, and I will explain what it's all about at that time. Okay, so take your clothes off, all of them, that's right. Stand up. Mouth open, wide. Okay, and now brush your hands through your hair. And now arms up, palms out. Okay, good. Turn around, left foot up. Now right foot up. And bend over and spread them. Okay, you can get dressed. You've just been strip searched. Now, I doubt that I would ever have had to go through that. I hadn't up to this point. I was halfway through my sentence, and I'm quite sure there's no reason for it. It's not common. But I'd signed up for it. And I'll explain. I'd been transferred down to the low-security camp at Leavenworth, and had started working there in the as a janitor and for the school, for the education department. And quite frankly, I was getting bored with that. And I had met the guy who was working in the commissary inside the big house. Now, one of the reasons that they build these low-security camps next to high-security prisons is so that there's inmates available to do work that needs to be done on the grounds and inside the prison, because you can't have high-security inmates, obviously, leaving the prison to cut grass and do those sorts of jobs. And one of the jobs inside is working in the commissary. They will not allow a high-security inmate to work behind somebody. So those jobs are filled by low-security inmates from the camp. And I had met the guy who had the job in there, the main guy, and he was getting short. He was getting out. And we'd become, I think he had like a month left to go, 3 weeks, something like that. And we'd become quite friendly. And he mentioned it to me, if I'd be interested in this, because they like to leave it up to the inmates to fill these positions. The commissary is not run by the prison, it's run by civilians. And I believe they tender on it for like 5 years, something like that. And they obviously don't, they can put in a request for somebody, and, you know, somebody would have to go in and do it. But they prefer to have the inmates look after themselves, recommend somebody who's going to know the job, know what's required, and go from there. And so I thought about it, not for very long. Like I say, I was ready for a change and a little bit of adventure, and so I agreed said that I would be interested in this. So I put in a form requesting a job transfer, which is what you have to do. And with his recommendation to his bosses, who the guys running the commissary, it was like 2 days, and I was hired. So they run both the commissary and the camp and inside the main prison. And so I had to start in the camp, which was fine. Turned out to be, it's the right thing to do. So you get accustomed to what the procedure is and how everything works. So, but I was only there for about a week. Like I say, the guy that I had met, the guy who was getting out, was really short, and they needed to get me in to show me the ropes inside, because it's quite a bit different. And so there's not that much to it really at the camp. It's the same products, we sell exactly the same stuff. So yeah, there's many reasons for wanting this job inside. It's a question for them of finding the right guy to do it. And it turns out that they did get the right guy in me. One of the reasons is prison commerce, and I'll talk more about that later. Eating short line is another big plus, because you eat with the cooks. You eat ahead of the dinner hour. We had to do that because we went in there early. And so that's really nice, you know, so you're not dealing with the big horde. And so I worked approximately 20 months at this job. I don't remember, I know I never missed a day. And so it was 5 days a week. So strip searched in and then strip searched out. And at first, I thought getting stripped on the way out was a bit excessive. But when you think about it, I mean, it's security, and policy is policy, and they don't want to take any chance that maybe you're smuggling a note out for somebody, or I don't think they're terribly worried about stealing a chocolate bar or something like that. That wouldn't be the reason. They don't do it at the camp, so anyway, got in there. And I'll just describe the commissary and say, no, I'm going to describe getting in there first. So those famous steps that go up to the prison, I don't know if you've ever seen a picture of Leavenworth, but, and I used to know how many steps there were, I've forgotten, but it's quite a few. And so you climb all those steps and get up, and there's a big door there, and there's obviously closed circuit TV. They can see you. And then we also have the benefit of knowing that they know we're coming, right? And so generally there was always two of us, and sometimes three. It just depended on the time of the month. When payday came around, which was about the third week in the month, then we always brought an extra guy in because it would get really busy and we could get backed up. So anyway, you stand out there, and then you hear a click, and the door opens, and that you can go into, and it's a very small area, just a vestibule, and the door clicks behind you, and they can still see you, of course. And then they open the next door, so it clicks, and then you walk in, and now you're in a little ante-room, I guess you'd call it. Well, it's not little; it's bigger. And there's a couple smaller rooms in there. And there's also the command center for the prison, like a big bubble where they have all the screens, and they can see all these different areas of the prison and keep an eye on things. And there we would be met by one of the hacks in there, and we would go into one of the small rooms. That's where we would get strip searched, and then get dressed, and then come back out of there. And then we had to go one by one and stand in front of this command center big bubble. And they would ask us for our prison number. They had our card, first of all, in front of them, and with our prison number on it, our picture and everything like that. And so they would compare the two, picture and our face, and then ask for our number. And I was 00847-046. I'll never forget it. And so then all two or three of us would do that. And then, so now we're cleared to go in. So now there's another door that slides open. Now this door, it has a window in it as well, okay, with, I'm sure, the plexiglass or bulletproof, I'm sure, bomb-proof, whatever. And so it slides open, and then you go in that, and now this area is about the size of like an elevator, and the hack is with you, and then that door slides closed, and then there's an identical door on the other side of that, same thing with a big picture window in it, so you can actually see through both doors into the little ante-room in the command center. And once the door behind you clicks and closes, there's a pause for a second, and then the other door opens up, and you go through that, and now you're in the main prison. So the commissary is on the same floor as that we were on, that we entered on, and it wasn't very far. 20-second walk, something like that. Like, it was really close. And so we go in there, and the hack doesn't go in there, and the civilian employees are in there. So now we're locked in there, so that's fine. Now I'll just explain, like in the high security measures that they have inside Leavenworth, and I guess every prison like that, they have what's called controlled movement. And that means that the prison is completely locked down except for 5 to the hour until 5 after the hour. So there's a 10-minute window there. So if you want to go somewhere, say out to the yard or to the library, you have those 10 minutes to do that. And then wherever you are at 5 after the hour, that's where you're going to stay for the next 50 minutes. And now they do not allow low security inmates and high security inmates to mingle. That's totally against the rules. So we always went in at a time when the prison was locked down. And that becomes interesting or important a little bit later on as I go here. So I'll just kind of describe, the inside of the commissary for you. Well, first of all, on the outside, there's a big roll top, okay, that rolls up when we're open. And it's a wall right up to waist high, or actually a little bit higher than that. I'm 6'2", and I would say it comes up to like the bottom of my rib cage, where the plexiglass starts, and then that runs the full width of the commissary, which was about 20 feet, I'd say, the width, and maybe 24 feet deep. And on the inside, there's a counter that runs the full length, the full 20 feet, that would be, I don't know if it would be 3 feet wide, less than that, 30 inches, say, something like that, 30 inches. And in the middle, there's where the two registers were set up, because there's two lines in there. And there's a big opening by the registers so that the goods, once they've been paid for, they go out through those holes to the inmate. There's a slot on either side close to the wall at the front, because the way you shop there is you fill out a form before you come, and that form has everything on it that we have in the commissary, and you put that through the slot, and then we do the shopping for the inmate. But first of all, I should go back and describe the rest of the inside of the commissary. Like, there's shelving that goes down both outside walls and across the back, and then there was 2 rows down the middle, and that they have all our goods on it that we sell there. Okay, there's actually quite a bit of room. Like, you could pass each other quite easily if you had to in between those aisles. And so the way it worked is that we had these boxes, like a flat of Coke, 24 cans of Coke. You know, they come, if you buy that, it comes in a cardboard container. It's the edges on it are 3 inches, maybe, something like that, all the way around. And we used those, and so the inmate would put his form through the slot to us, and we would have the box sitting there in front of him, and then we would go and do all his shopping for him, and he can watch what goes into his box as we do this, and then the box slides with the inmate towards the middle, and this is happening on both sides, and he walks with his box, and then when he gets up to the register, the civilian people that were running the place, they had a file for all the inmates there, and they would get his file number, check his number, how much money he had in his account, etc., and then ring everything up, pass all it through him, and then that's how it worked. So there's 2 lines, like I said, and well, first of all, we were open 5 days a week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then Saturday mornings. And to shop on Tuesday, they went by your prison number. 00847 was mine, okay? So the Tuesday night, inmates from 0 to 24 could shop, and then on Wednesday it was 25 to 49, and then 50 to 74, etc., okay? And then the last digit, whether it was odd or even. If it was odd, then you lined up on the left. If it was even, then you lined up on the right. So that's how that worked. And then we were open on Saturday mornings for anybody that couldn't shop during the week for whatever reason. And then also on Saturday afternoon, there was another store that was right next to us. It was adjoining the commissary. It was where we sold dry goods, running shoes, sweatsuits, paints, and that kind of crap. And we'll talk about that later. So, and it all worked pretty smoothly. We got good at our jobs. We knew where everything was, and never really had any problem with anything. When it got busy, like I said, it was the 3rd week in the month where payday from the factory, where the inmates got paid, and then that would be our biggest night of the month for sure. And then we would have an extra man come in just to flip back and forth between the 2 lines and help us out a little bit. And sometimes we had to do a little bit of restocking in there as well, and so we needed help with that. And so we always needed this 3rd man, and he would work at the camp commissary and be available to come in on short notice. Maybe somebody would get sick or something. We always had to have that 3rd guy available. So talking about prison commerce. There's a lot that goes into that. There's commerce no matter where you go in this world, whether you're on a beach in Morocco or somebody's coming around with coffee in the morning or pastries or selling you hash or whatever. Everywhere I've been in my life, commerce exists. Well, commerce certainly exists inside prison. And less so inside for me than down at the camp, because there's no reason for me. I can't there's no commerce available to me inside the big house, whereas there is in the camp. But before my friend left, he had told me a few things that needed to be looked after in there, certain inmates that got special attention. And those were the mafia guys. And Buffalino was the main guy. I don't know how long he'd been in there, if he was ever getting out. And they always come with a bodyguard. And so when I first went in there, he had the right-hand line, and I started over on the left-hand side, which is fine. But he wanted me to pay attention to him, and he was going to let me know when some of these guys came along. Okay, would get my attention and make sure I saw some faces and learned what I needed to do. This is important. These are very powerful men, and yet they're not on the street anymore. They're in prison, but they still carry all their power with them. And that goes all the way up the line to these civilian employees and with the prison guards, everybody. They have, well, I guess you have to call it respect. That's what power gives you. So anyway, I learned all this as we were going along. And it wasn't really that many guys. More the bodyguards, I guess. And there was a few, like he was a big shot, this Buffalino. He was from Scranton, Pennsylvania. And there was one main bodyguard that, when there's only one, it's easy to remember him. But there was a few other guys too, and so you learn who they are. Okay, the commerce in both prisons is ice cream. Ice cream and avocados are the two big ones, and then bananas to a certain extent. Everybody buys ice cream. You can go once a week and pretend you're at home and you're just out buying an ice cream. And everybody does it. Now, the big brains that run the commissary, and I don't know quite how they got to this point, how they think, but this is how it was. There was unlimited amount of vanilla and chocolate, and then every night we had one case of chocolate chip, one case of butter brickle, one case of black almond, I think it was, and cherry nut, okay? And so you need to make sure that you have this ice cream available if one of these very important people wants that. So you have to remember that. I don't know if anybody's seen how you pack a case of bananas or how a case of bananas comes, but they come in different sizes, right? There's some that are like 8 inches and then 10 inches and then 12 inches. Well, they pack a case of bananas with the smallest ones on the bottom layer, okay, the 8-inch ones, we'll call them, with their little curve in them, curve facing down. And then on top of that, they put the medium size, the 10-inch ones fit on top of those quite nicely. And then the biggest ones, the 12-inchers, they sit on top. They're the top layer, okay? Makes perfect sense. And the way they sell them, though, is the issue. And I know this is a small thing, but it's not so small with certain people, because they sold them 5 for, and I forget the price, let's say 50 cents, okay? So it's always, you couldn't buy 1, you couldn't buy 6, you had to buy 5, all right? So you're going to get 5 8-inch bananas, or you can get 5 12-inch bananas, right? It's the same fucking price. Makes no sense, really. But on the other hand, it does make sense. They can't do it really any other way. There's no time, there's no scale, there's none of that. This isn't Safeway, right? So when Buffalino wants bananas, he gets the big bananas, period. You need to pay attention to that, okay? We had to pay attention to that. And the funny thing about him was that he could have any ice cream he wanted, but he was vanilla ice cream. Vanilla not being an adjective that I would maybe ordinarily use to describe Mr. Buffalino. And his bodyguard, this guy was the main bodyguard. We saw him a lot. And he was vanilla as well. And then I'll just mention avocados here too, because same thing with them. They would only get in one case of avocados per night, or they only had one case available per night. I think the other ones were there. They wouldn't get them delivered every single day. And, you create supply and demand. If there's more demand than there is supply, then they become valuable. And I don't care where you are in this world, that's economics, right? And so, although it didn't matter a heck of a lot inside, it did matter down at the camp, and I'll talk more about that later. But none of these guys, the mafia guys that we were looking after, wanted avocados, so we didn't have to worry about that. I guess avocados and Italian food just don't mix. I don't know. So anyway, back to Buffalino. He wouldn't fill out the form. And so, occasionally, if he needed toothpaste and coffee, once a month or every 6 weeks or whatever, then he'd have to fill out the form because he needed more than just... Because he only wanted 3 things every time he came. And he would bend over and talk to me through the slot. I'd have to bend over and put my ear down there. And I'm telling you what, Hollywood couldn't script a better voice or better person than this. His voice he had this gravelly voice. And he'd say to me, 2 cartons of Camel Filter, 2 vanilla ice creams, and a hand of bananas. That used to just kill me. It was a hand of bananas. And so I'd get him his big bananas and his 2 vanilla ice creams and his 2 cartons of, and I'm sure the cigarettes, I don't even know if he smoked, but cigarettes are commerce in prison, for sure, okay? Guaranteed one of those cartons was going to the bodyguard, maybe both of them, I don't really know. Maybe he smoked, how would I know? So, but the hand of bananas, that used to just kill me, and it was every time. So one of the big perks that I wasn't aware of until after I got working in there, my friend hadn't really mentioned it to me, was going in on Saturday mornings to work, because we were open, I think it was around 10 o'clock, something like that, which meant we were going to miss lunch. And so we got fed inside. And we had this guy, he was a black guy who worked in the kitchen. It was the same guy the whole time I was there. And what he did is he came and took our orders. And what we wanted, now it was always breakfast every single time. So it wasn't like we were getting soup and sandwich. It was always bacon and eggs. And it was incredible. He'd come right over and they'd let him right into the back, and he'd come with a waiter. He had a pad with a pen. And there was always 4 of us. No, 5. There would have been 3 civilian employees. There was one guy, they had a little office there, I guess in case they needed somebody extra, and then the 2 lines. So there was 3 of them and 2 of us. So there was always 5. And probably Saturday morning, I don't think we ever had a third inmate in there. But he would come, like I said, and take our orders. Incredible. And, bacon over easy and whole wheat, thanks, and get everybody's order. And then away he'd go. And he'd come back once we'd shopped everybody Saturday morning that hadn't been able to shop earlier in the week. He'd come back and he had this trolley, delivery at a hotel or something, and with our plates on there, and he would heat the plates up. Now, nobody does that, right? Well, fancy restaurants, but he heated our plates up. He wouldn't put our eggs on a cold plate or our bacon on a cold plate. And they had these covers on them like hospital, like you get in a hospital or something. So it was sealed up in a hot plate. And he'd come and serve us our dinner. It was amazing. it was a highlight of the week for me, for sure, to get treated like that. And everything was always cooked perfectly. I don't know if he did it himself, probably. And then he'd always, not always, but he'd show up like on the bottom of this trolley that he had. There was another shelf there. And I mean, you could smell him coming before cinnamon buns, fresh right out of the oven, cinnamon buns. Incredible. Like, I don't care who you are, like fresh cinnamon buns, that'll make your head spin, right? Yeah, he really looked after us. And I'll tell you what, he was in my line. He was on the right-hand side where all these heavy mafia guys were. He just happened to be in my line, and I looked after him. And, I told him, first of all, I should mention, we're not to communicate with the inmates at all. That's totally forbidden. And understandably, it's security, right? But we did communicate with them through the slot because they're fucking idiots, right? They can't fill out a simple form, They'd start off and they'd put something in, how many pop they want or something, and then they'd scratch that out, and then they'd write in the margin, and then you couldn't read their writing and crap like that. So we would have to talk with these guys, when we were shopping them, and nobody ever said anything about that. That's just perfectly normal. But you did not communicate, try to strike up a friendship or anything like that with these guys. Like I say, that was totally forbidden. But this black guy who came in and did our cooking for us on Saturday, we got to know him a little bit. Like I say, he came right into the back, and I told him, and this was like right in front of the civilian employees. First of all, I mean, the civilian employees, this is what they want, is these mafia guys looked after, and they had me trained, and I knew what to do. So there's no big surprise here when I said to this black guy, I said, what do you want? You can have it. You can have anything we've got in here. You let me know. Your ice cream, I said, if you want 4 ice creams, you can have 4 ice creams, which anybody could, really. That's no big thing. But if you want cherry nut, or you make sure, and avocados, now there's a limit of 2 avocados per person, and we couldn't violate that. So I just wanted to make sure that this guy knew that where he stood with the commissary, and he knew, and we did look after him. I can't tell you now what kind of ice cream he wanted. I've forgotten, but so anyway, now I got one more story to tell before I get to the one that I really want to tell, and it's got to be 87 by now. I got out in 87 in the end of September. And that summer, it was on the news all the time, and you'd have to be, my age, not quite as old as me necessarily to remember, but they had a big sweep in New York City of all the mafia bosses. There's 5 boroughs, and there's 5 bosses, and they'd put a massive effort into this, wiretap and who knows what all. And it was on the news and all the trials and everything, and these guys all get found guilty. And I can remember sitting outside at the camp talking to some guys, and the guy that I worked with in particular was there, and wondering if one of these 5 guys was going to end up in Leavenworth. And so we're kind of following the papers, and we watched the news too. It was on. We had 2 TV rooms. And, we learned that some of them, and I even remember the one guy's name, Provenzano, and there was another one. They were so old and decrepit, they just went straight to the prison hospital where they were going to die before long. I know there's many. Leavenworth's not the only high-security prison in the United States, that's for sure. Atlanta, and I don't even know what, Lompoc, I think. Leavenworth's probably the most famous for some reason. I think because Al Capone was there, or, stuff like that. And don't you know, we do, just a random chance, get another guy at Leavenworth. And his name was, and I saw it written down, so I'll tell you the way I saw it. It was Anthony, Tony Ducks in parentheses, Corallo. So Tony Corallo, and his nickname was Tony Ducks. And he shows up in my line. A few weeks go by. Okay, like there's they got to get him there and blah, blah. Who knows? He's got to stay in New York for, I think actually that's 30 days for an appeal. You have to be in New York City where the trial was in remand there. You stay there for the 30 days. I forget all that stuff. But anyway, here's this Corallo. And before that shift that day, one of the civilian employees said something to me, okay? Just in case I didn't bump hip when this guy shows up with their bodyguard, I would have recognized the bodyguard for sure. And I would have known what was going on just because I was aware, read the papers and listened to the news. But he wanted to make sure anyway that he knew this guy was coming through the line that night. And sure enough, he shows up. And now I can't tell you now because I've forgotten what kind of ice cream, if he was vanilla too. Well, the bodyguard was for sure. I knew that. And I couldn't even tell if he smoked. Memory's a funny thing. My memory is really good. And then the next second, it's ready to embarrass me. Like, this isn't really embarrassing, but because I remember enough about it. And, like, I don't even remember the bananas. If he was probably, Italians like bananas. And so looked after him, no problem, right? Okay, so away he goes and just continued on with the night. We finished our job and just another day after that, so... Now, I mentioned already that we had an adjoining room where the stores were, and that's what we called it. And we were open on Saturday afternoons, every Saturday. So we got our big restaurant meal, and then I forget what time we opened up, 1 o'clock, whatever, something like that. And it ran a little bit differently. Like there wasn't much shopping going on there, so they didn't need to have two separate lines. They would let two guys in at a time. So the inmates who wanted to shop stayed out in the hall, and then two were allowed in at one time, and there was two of us to help them out. And we sold running shoes. We had really quite a selection of running shoes, tennis shoes, walking shoes, running shoes, and different brands. And I won't do any commercials here for any of the brands out there. And we had tracksuits, and they were just one company, and they were blue, red, and then the silver with black trim on it, which was actually quite nice. The other things we sold were paints, oil. We had all the oil paints you could think of, all the acrylic paints, paint brushes from the finest, most delicate little... you could hardly even count the number. You probably could count the number of hairs that were in the brush to the ones that were thick. Anyway, all kinds. We had all that stuff, canvas and everything you need if you want to be a painter. And we had wool. Now, I'm guessing there's not many people know this or would even guess at it or ever even think about it. But there's a knitting club. I don't know if they call themselves an actual club, but there's a group of men in there that knit. This has become their hobby, and they do a lot of good things. They knit toques and sweaters and scarves. I don't know what all they knit, and they give it away as charity. They do charity work with it. I can't tell you who got it, a church or Salvation Army and. So we did a lot. We sold quite a bit of wool. Now, a box of wool doesn't weigh very much, obviously, and it's quite big. Like it would come up like to my waist, because I could bend over and touch the bottom of the box on the inside. It was what you needed to do to get to the bottom, right? And these guys would come in and they'd have a new project in mind, and so he'd want 8 skeins of red and 2 white and, I don't know, black or whatever. Okay, he's got the directions there. He knows exactly what he needs. So you'd sell him all that, and away you go. And shop the next guy, sell him shoes or whatever. And we go through these boxes we had like all the colors, red, white, green, you name it. And then when you got down to, so you're in the box of red, say, and you got down to, say, the last 2 or 3 skeins, well, rather than keep this great big dumb empty box with just 3 skeins in it, we had one box where we would just take the 2 or 3, whatever, and throw them in there. So we had one box that had 2 or 3 skeins of like all the colors in there. Okay, it was this big jumble mixed up. And, 2 months would go by, and then this fucking guy would be back again, and he'd have the die code. It's a little white tag with a number on it from wool that he'd bought 2 months prior, and he needed one more, and he'd be indignant. It had to be this dye color. And so we'd have to go in the back and dig through our box that had the big assortment in it and try and find the red and match up the dye tag for him. And, the chances of success were pretty small because we did sell quite a bit. It was amazing. So we'd have to go back out there and tell the guy, look, we don't have this fucking die code. And this is exactly the way you talk to him, okay? It's not my fucking fault. Don't look at me like that, okay? We got more red. Here's a red, okay? This doesn't satisfy you. I can't help you, okay? Well, he's got to take it. He's got no choice, right? And red's red. In my eyes, I can't tell the difference, but, fucking bunch of, like, old ladies. So this story just absolutely floors me. When I talk about the power and the respect that these mafia guys had, and how this could even happen, I don't know. I don't know what the chain would be, how it would go from Corallo, say Corallo's A and I'm D. It must go from Corallo, who's A, to somebody who's B, to somebody who's C, which would be my boss, one of the civilian guys. Russ was his name. And we got to know these guys really well. I mean, I was in there 20 months, and it was basically the same guys all the time. And it wasn't like we'd walk in there and say, oh, hey, Russ, so, how's the wife and kids? It wasn't that kind of a friendship, but we worked together for hours and hours and hours and ate together and spent a lot of time together. And so you get to know them, right? You get to know their wives' names, their kids' names, where they went on holidays, what they did in their spare time. And so Russ and I, we all got along in there. Russ says to me, we're just getting ready to open up the stores this one Saturday afternoon. And he says to me, we want you to go over and shop Mr. Corallo. Corallo. I don't know if he said Mr. or not. And he opened up the door to the stores, and I went in there. Now, he left the door ajar. And this was during lockdown. This was not 5-2 or 5 after, okay? This was during lockdown. And so I go over there, and the only thing in there is just a counter, like you'd see in any normal store. There's no plexiglass. There's no protection between you and inmate or anybody else, okay? You're face-to-face with them. This is a big violation that they allow to have happen. It has to happen in there. So I go over there, and I'm standing on my side of the counter, and the door opens, and in walks Anthony Tony fucking Ducks Corallo, and the main bodyguard, the guy that was most prominent bodyguard in there. And he wants to buy running shoes and a tracksuit. Now, Corallo is about 5'6", any way you want to measure him. Now, that's being a little rude. He wasn't quite that fat, and he was a little bit taller than that. So let's call him 5'8", with his shoes on. And he was packing around quite the gut, let's put it that way. So, and he says to me, oh, well, I'm going to buy a pair of running shoes. And I say, okay, well, we have tennis shoes, we have walking shoes, and we have running shoes. And he said, well, let me look at some. So I said, okay, so I got to ask him what size his fucking feet are. So I can't remember, 9s, let's say, whatever. So I go back and I get a couple of different kinds of shoes, and he checks them out. And he likes the one, so he tries them on, and he goes, yeah, these are fine, these fit good. He says, I like these, I'll take these. And then he says, the bodyguard is standing there. This bodyguard, I'm telling you what, he doesn't even blink. He never takes his eyes off of me ever once. I don't even look at him. Fuck him, okay? Because I'm into this now. And fuck him, I don't, he's just an accessory at this point. So Carlo says he wants a tracksuit. And so I say, well, we got red, blue, and we've got these silver and black. I said, the silver and black are really nice. He says, get me one of those. So I'm smart enough not to ask if he wants an extra large or even a large. He's a medium for sure, right? At least I think. Maybe it was a large. I don't know. So I go back and I get one of those. And he doesn't try the pants on, but he puts on the top. And he manages to squeeze his gut into this thing and do the zipper up. And he's all pleased with himself. He says, yep, okay, this is it. This is what I want. And as soon as he said that, the door swings open and Russ comes in. And there's a till there. And he rings up the Mr. Carlo's purchases, and there you go. Blows my mind. It absolutely blew my mind then, and this is 35 years later, it still blows my mind. The power that these men have, and that's all I can say about it, I guess. It's quite the story. But I wanted to tell those two stories just because they're so unique. They did happen to me, and they're true stories, but fuck them. Like, I think I'm impressed by them? Not at all. They're fucking gangsters and got where they are by fear and intimidation and murder. And, I might have been in prison, but, I never owned a gun. I didn't need one, I had people breaking my door down trying to get what I had. No, I say any more about that, no. Well, like I say, I wanted to tell those two stories. But I have a story that I really do want to tell. And it started when my first day or two, my first or second shift, when I went in there, and I was still on the left-hand side, and my friend was there. And you can see the inmates as they're coming across, but you don't pay any attention. What for? You're busy, right? And it was the civilian employees were talking, and they mentioned Peltier. And I'm listening to this, and the Americans are, they're so phonetically challenged, it's unbelievable. They don't teach phonetics down there, I guess. And so I'm going about my business, and they're talking about this guy, Peltier. And I'm thinking to myself, Peltier, that's Peltier, not Peltier. So I get around and I have a look at who it is they're talking about. And then I realize who it is. It's Leonard Peltier. And I knew the Leonard Peltier story. And anybody my age would, and especially if you're from Calgary or Western Canada, and probably all of Canada. And he was convicted of killing 2 federal agents, execution style. Now, it's a long, involved story, and so I'll start by when it really first came to my attention in Canada, because he was a fugitive from justice, and he had gotten into Canada, and I believe at first he was in the Medicine Hat area. And that's just my memory. I could be wrong about that. But he was eventually arrested. He was up in Grand Prairie, that area. And he avoided arrest for, I don't know, it was over a year, for quite some time. He had friends in Canada, Native American friends. Leonard Peltier was a member of AIM, A-I-M, which stands for American Indian Movement. But he was from Pine Ridge, South Dakota, the reserve there, where they'd been having all kinds of trouble with the federal government, the way they were being treated. And there's a movie about this, and the movie goes into it a lot more detail than I can, and I would urge anybody to I've seen the movie, but I didn't review it again before doing this tape. The movie is produced by Robert Redford. You might remember that name. It's called Incident at Oglala, Oglala. But I had a notion to do it because it's so many years have gone by, and so I did find it online. It's not on YouTube. You can find it. And they charge $5, which is not a big deal. But I decided I didn't really need to. It's only an hour or maybe 80 minutes, something like that. So anyway, I didn't do it. But the movie goes into all the problems that the residents of that reserve were having with the federal government and the violence and the et cetera, et cetera. And I don't know if it was where AIM originated but there was a lot of people from AIM, the American Indian Movement, that lived there in that area. And so these two agents, and I can't remember their names, they were both young, FBI, were assassinated on the reserve. And I can remember the pictures of it, like it's a very deserted spot. There's like this gravel road. And so nobody knows because there's no eyewitnesses. There's no ballistics. There's no murder weapon. They don't have any evidence, really, of this, of it happening. And that day, Leonard, now, flight is considered a sign of guilt. Okay, I can understand that, but I think that flight can also be a sign of you're just afraid that they're just going to do something to you anyway, like why hang around? The two agents were killed, so why not just leave, I don't want to make excuses for them. I don't know, but two men, they were arrested. One was Robideau, and I used to know the name of the other guy. Jimmy Butler and Leonard Peltier were all charged in this. Now, I don't know how they came to lay these charges. Leonard takes off, the other two get arrested, and they have a trial. And like I say, there's no evidence. They don't have an eyewitness. They don't have any ballistics. They don't have the murder weapon. They got nothing. And so Butler and Robideau are found not guilty. And that's the end of that. Away they go. Leonard avoids arrest for a year and a half, whatever it was. He's up in Canada. Finally gets arrested. He fights extradition. Now, I know this for a fact, is that the Americans, the Attorney General of Canada at that time was Warren Ullman. I remember that. And I believe that's Pierre Trudeau government. I think I'm right when I say that. But Warren Ullman was the Attorney General, and ultimately he's the one that makes the decision on extradition. And I know that Canada then, and still to this day, I believe, will not extradite somebody to a country where they're going to face the death penalty. And I don't know whether the death penalty was in play at all in this case, but that would have had to have been agreed that would not be applied in the event of a guilty verdict. But the Americans did lie in their affidavit to Warren Ullman, and the lie wasn't really discovered until after Leonard was extradited down to the United States. What difference that would have made, I don't know. I can't tell you what the lie was, but I do know that they did lie. The American government, the authorities, somebody had to pay for the death of these two federal agents. They managed to get a change of venue away. I think went up into Montana. They got the judge that they wanted. They got the prosecutor that they wanted. They have a witness, and I think her name was Betty Poorhouse, something like that. And she's in the movie Incident at Oglala. And when you see her, you know how when you see somebody who has some mental challenges or has some a low IQ or that kind of thing, and you just sort of know when you see them and how they're, well, when you see Betty Poorhouse, you'll know that what I'm talking about. And she gave some testimony at that trial that went against Leonard. I don't remember what the testimony was, but something about, having seen him down there or going that way or running away or whatever. I don't really want to say because I've forgotten. So, but she has since recanted that testimony, but the appeal court wouldn't listen to it. Anyway, I kind of got ahead of myself there a little bit. Leonard Peltier was defended by Kunstler was his name, and he was a civil rights activist lawyer, and he did it pro bono, which means he took the case for free, no fee. And Leonard Peltier was found guilty on no evidence. I mean, they still didn't have ballistics. DNA didn't exist back in those days. There wouldn't have been any anyway. No murder weapon. He was found guilty, and he has lost every appeal that he's ever filed. And there's been many. They've come up with a lot of reasons to ask for a new trial. There was a lot of international attention on this case, and because of his Native American status, because of the lack of evidence, he's actually won awards, international awards for, I don't know, freedom or exactly what these awards were. You need to watch the movie, because in the movie, unlike in Canada, down the States, they're much more open with their justice system, and you're allowed to talk to the jurors. And in fact, in that movie, they do talk to the jurors. They talk to Kunstler. They talk to the judge. They talk to the prosecutor. They talk to a lot of people in there. And it's very interesting to hear both sides of this. And the bottom line is there's still no evidence. I don't give a shit how you stack it up and who you talk to. Like, somebody like that prosecutor, I mean, good God, what a man he is. Anyway, so I'm aware of all this. And Leonard Peltier, when I moved over to the right-hand side, is in my line. The very first time he comes up, and he puts his sheet through the slot there for me to do his shopping for him, I pull the sheet out, and I stand right there, and I hold it up, and I'm looking at it. And then I lean over, and he's watching me, and I lean down to the hole, and I say, "Hey, Peltier, what the fuck is this?" And I'm pointing down at the ice cream. "What kind of ice cream do you want?" And he looked at me, and he knew right away, he knew that I was Canadian. And he says, he gave me the kind of ice cream he wanted. And that was it. I turned away. Can't talk to these guys, right? And I did his shopping, filled his box. He's right there. And he's looking at me. I'm not really looking at him. I glance up and then slide his box down a little bit, and he moves down. The next guy comes along. So for 20 months, approximately, I gave Leonard Peltier first-class treatment, such as it is. And that man is still in prison. I did look this up. All you do is Google Leonard Peltier. He's in Florida now. It's over 50 years that he's been in prison. He's never going to get out. That man is going to die in prison. Leonard Peltier might be guilty. He might be the killer here. But there's no evidence whatsoever. He should not be in prison. This is not how our justice system should work. It's just disgusting. It disgusts me. It should disgust everybody. And I know what I did for Leonard is fucking ice cream. Like he wasn't into avocados, maybe bananas. Crepes, I can't even remember that. And what I did for him, just that little wee sliver, that's all it is, just a sliver of kindness. I'm goddamn proud of what I did. And I know Leonard appreciated it because even though you can't communicate, I'd look at him and he'd catch my eye, and I could tell by his eyes. And he would just give this tiny little imperceptible nod, like just barely move his head up and down. I knew. He knew. I knew. I'm glad I did it. On the day that I recorded the big house, I was wired. I was right into it, and I did the whole hour virtually in an hour. Just a couple of stops for just to have a drink of water, and so the tech guy could get the kinks out of his fingers. But in the Leonard Peltier story, when I got to the part about Betty Poorhouse and that portion of the story, I was in trouble. I wasn't as prepared as I thought I was, but I just powered right through it. And actually, you may not notice that when just listening to it. And so I want to correct that. But because of the way I recorded it, with me going off on little tangents and coming back, it's virtually impossible to go. I'd have to redo the whole thing, and I could never match the tempo. And so this is what I decided to do anyway, is create this addendum, do a little research, and get the facts correct. So first thing, Robideau and Butler were acquitted. They had claimed self-defense. And it's kind of unclear from what I read whether that's why they were acquitted, or like I said before, there's just really no evidence anyway. So Myrtle Poorbear, I got the name wrong. It's not Betty. And she did sign a statement claiming to be Leonard's girlfriend, and that she was at the shootout and that she saw him shoot the agents. Her signed statement was what was presented to the Canadian government at Leonard's extradition hearing and resulted in him being extradited. She recanted that testimony before Leonard's trial, and it was proven that she was not Leonard's girlfriend. In fact, she did not know Leonard. Leonard had never been to her house, and she had not been at the shootout. She said the agents had intimidated her and forced her to sign this statement, threatening to take her children away. Somehow the prosecution was able to keep her from taking the witness stand. I'm not going to go on and on, but there's a couple other things that happened at that trial that I'll mention. One was an FBI agent got on the stand and testified that he had followed a red and white van to the scene that Leonard was known to use from time to time. That was a lie. He had already made a statement earlier that it was actually a half-ton that he had been following. Another FBI agent took the stand and testified that a shell casing found at the scene had been matched with a gun that was known to belong to Leonard. That was a lie. The actual evidence was that the casing was proven to be not from the gun owned by Leonard Peltier. And I believe that was found out later on through the Freedom of Information Act. The whole thing's just unbelievable. There were several attempts to get a new trial for Leonard, and each time the appeal court refused that. There is a tenet that our justice system is based on, that it is better for 1,000 guilty men to go free than to convict one innocent man.